everyone, I'm Rebecca from the Good Stitchery. I'm here today with another dye day video. This one is going to be a little bit more comprehensive than most of my other ones, probably a little bit longer, but I just got my most recent shipment from Echoview fiber mill and I have all this roving to try out now. So I have 4 different varieties, 8 ounces of each for us to try in this video specifically, and then I have like 5 more pounds to do in future videos. So Echoview Fiber Mill is a mill in North Carolina. I think they're based out of Weaverville, which is a spectacular name for a town. I love it. And they're pretty great. I like their products a lot. You may have seen me use the Recycled Yarn Collective Man-Eater yarn in a couple of recent videos. I do really like that yarn too. But one of the things with Echoview Fiber Mill is they do have a members only mill shop. So you pay a yearly fee, and then every 2 months they update the shop with like mill ends, bits of roving that they decided not to turn into yarn for one reason or another, imperfect knit objects, stuff like that. So every 2 months they update it, I log on, and I buy what I think would be useful because the prices are really good. So that's where I got all of the bulky yarns for my sampler scarf video from last November, I think. And I did a big order of fiber from them around that same time, and I just only recently finished dyeing all of that up, so I needed the next batch. What else have I bought? Oh, sometimes I buy the cones of fingering weight yarn for dye work, so the white fingering weight. So the merino tencel that I've dyed in the past was from them. And they do just have a really good quality product. I'm not affiliated or anything. I don't think they even do affiliates, but I can't help but talk them up because they're pretty awesome. So when they have spinning fiber for sale that is not alpaca, not because I don't like alpaca, I just prefer processing alpaca from fleeces rather than roving. Anyway, when they have roving available, I do try to buy some. They sell it in 8-ounce balls most of the time. So it ends up being like, with shipping, if I buy 5 or 6 pounds, it ends up being like $11 a pound, which is pretty good for very nicely processed roving. Pretty happy with that. So I have 4 different varieties ready. I'm gonna flip the camera around, we're gonna take a look at them, and then we're gonna end up dyeing them today. Originally I was gonna dye them all the same colorway, but that sounds too boring for me. I am, however, going to write down exactly what measurements I used for the dye, and we're going to try to be more precise about it, if possible. And just, you know, same as usual, I'm going to be wearing my respirator when I'm working with the dry dye powders, goggles, safety first. I put down like a drop sheet around my stove so that I can clean up the floor more easily. You don't usually see that part because I don't show my floor. And usually I end up cleaning everything with like, not bleach, what do I use? I think it's mostly like rubbing alcohol based. I don't know if you've ever gotten ballpoint pen on something and cleaned it with rubbing alcohol, but it's a similar concept. So when stuff stains my floor or stove, that's usually what I use to get it off. It's not really a stain necessarily because it does come off, but I just happened to move into an apartment with white floors in the kitchen and white countertops, and if any of the dye gets on any of it, it's super noticeable and it's very stressful. So there's that. So yeah, let me just flip the camera around and let's take a look at what we're going to be dyeing today. Alright, so these are 4 separate blends that I have bought. So this one here is from the Recycled Yarn Collective. I'm not sure if it's Man-Eater or the other white one, but basically it is wool plus recycled bits of something, either yarn or ties. I'm not sure which one it is, whether it's yarn or ties. I'm leaning towards yarn though, because the bits aren't big enough to be the necktie one. I can't remember off the top of my head if the wool is reclaimed as well or just this other fibers in it, but it's very soft. The majority of their yarns have some merino component. You can definitely feel that. This one I bought last winter. It's not one they normally carry, so I just have 1 pound of it, this plus another half of it. So this is merino with silver stellina. This one's a little bit more fragile than the others. We are going to dye this one first, and I'll explain why after I get through these two. This one is Roving from their Ranger line. So it's a mix of merino and rambouillet. And this one's like a brown toned one. And then this is the Superwash Merino. They don't normally carry this, but they've been trying to sell it off for the past few ones, and I buy a little more each time because it is really fun to dye. If they have any more after, I might try to buy them out next time because I do really enjoy dyeing this stuff. Alright, so the current plan is to use the same dye pot and then try to get the colors to stick fully so that the dye pot has no color in it before I add the next round. Now the one issue is the stellina. If you use too much acid with stellina, it turns dull. And if it's in the heat too long, it turns dull. So the current plan is to do the stellina first with no acid in the pan at all, jack up the heat, and once it comes to heat, add the acid at that point and hope that it sets quickly enough so that I don't have a bunch of dye running everywhere. So I think I'm going to try to go through and pick colors that I know will strike fast for this one so that I can deal with that as quickly as possible. These three should be fine with as much acid as I want to add. Obviously Superwash is the easiest, so I'm going to do these two before the Superwash, and then whatever is left in terms of acid, that won't hurt the Superwash in any way. And also Superwash can handle extra heat, so it's going to get pretty hot by the end because I'm just going to be removing the wool and adding the next one to the pot. I think I'm going to use the large rectangular pan instead of the kettle, and that should work fine. That way I can do more of a pour over type method for the dyes. I want to use 3 or 4 colors for each of these, just, I don't know, that just seems like a good number, I think. I'm going to try to be focusing more on red tones for the brown one, and then probably more like blue tones for the Recycled Yarn Collective one. I'm not sure about these two yet, so like I said, I have to go through and see which of my dyes strikes faster. I have notes, but I'm pretty sure it'd be more like shades of green that strike fastest, as long as they're not radioactive green, which is the slowest dye I have. I don't know, I'll have to check my notes, and then this one I'll just pick something. I don't know. So I'm gonna go pick the dyes, get all of these soaking in tap water, and we'll probably be back and start dye work in an hour or so. Alright, so I spent some time debating whether or not I wanted to film this part because I did make a pretty huge mistake. Well, technically 2 mistakes, but one of them was significantly larger than the other. And I'm kind of embarrassed about it, but I am going to tell you what I did because maybe it'll help someone else so they don't end up making the same mistake. So, when I was getting my colors ready, the plan was 4 colors per each of the 8 ounces. And I was going to weigh them out. I'm going to tell you right now, the Merino and Stellina one I did not end up weighing because as I was getting that one ready to dye, one of my sisters called me and asked me to go with her somewhere to run an errand, and I was already in the middle of it and I didn't have time to be precise about it, so I just used my little measuring spoon thing and sprinkled it on. I didn't weigh that one. Now actually that one I did not end up using too much dye. Pretty much all of it stuck, which was great. So the Merino Stellina worked fine. But for the other 3, I had them all. I had all the dyes out on my desk, and I was weighing them out. Now, I watched enough ChemKnits videos to know that a 1% dye stock, it involves 1 gram of dye. And then a 1%, how do I phrase that? I had this all in my head enough. Basically, you want 1 gram of dye to 100 grams of yarn. I forget the exact terminology for it, but it's that. The problem comes in the conversions of grams to ounces, because all of the wool I was dyeing was in ounces, so I had 8-ounce bundles. Now in my brain, I know that a 100 gram skein of yarn is roughly 3.5 ounces. Like, I know that. However, when I was doing the math about how much dye I would need, and it wasn't even really math, it was more of a estimate, my brain transposed grams and ounces, and I ended up measuring out 1 gram to 1 ounce of yarn, or at least that was the goal, because I was like, oh, 8 ounces of yarn, 8 ounces of wool, I will measure out 4 grams of dye. So I had 4 grams to 8 ounces of wool. Now the problem was that 8 ounces is actually 226.796 grams, which means that what I actually needed was more like 2¼ grams. So I was almost double the amount of dye I needed. So I finished up the Ranger, and I had the recycled yarn collective in the dye pot, and I was getting ready to add the color. I was like, why did I have so much dye left from the Ranger? That was a lot of leftover dye. What happened? And then I realized where my math went wrong. So this is what I was supposed to have. This is what I did. So yeah, I'm very frustrated with myself. That was a lot of extra dye, and I ended up just adding skeins in to try to soak up that dye. So I ended up skeining up the last of my Merino Tencel. So I have 1 skein of Merino Tencel that I put into the leftovers of the Scarlet, Cherry Red, Deep Orange, and Sun Yellow. These ones all used jacquard only. So these are all jacquard colors. So yeah, I had the recycled yarn collective in the water, soaking up a tiny bit of this mixture that was left, and then I was putting the colors on top. And I was like, well, I'll just use 3 of them, and then I'll dye a cashmere sweater that I was planning to unravel in anything that's left in the water after that. So I added the turquoise, sky blue, and gunmetal to that one, and then the cashmere sweater on top of it. Then I had the chartreuse left over, and this is where I ended up with my second mistake, because I had the superwash merino ready, and I was going to put purple pop, neon, fluorescent fuchsia, fluorescent lemon, and fluorescent safety orange. I only did 1/2 gram of the purple pop, and then I did 1 gram each of the rest of them. So that was already 4 colors, but I was adding a huge skein of merino tencel in with it. So I knew that I could probably handle the 4.5 grams of dye that it would be if I did all these 4 colors plus the chartreuse. So I was like, I'll just add the chartreuse on the end. I did not think about that. The color actually does go really well with the neon yellow, but that yarn is way more wild than I was planning on, so now I have to think about what I'm going to use that for. I had also stuffed everything in there really tight, so it's very variegated, but that was a purposeful choice. I wanted that. So yeah, now it's almost a rainbow, but not quite. You'll see once everything's dry, but that was a less important mistake. The bigger mistake is that I used almost twice the amount of dye I had meant to. So I just wanted to mention that for anyone else who is buying spinning fiber, which is generally in this country at least sold by the ounce, and trying to dye it up. If you have 8 ounces of spinning fiber, you want more like 2.25 grams of dye, not 4 grams of dye. Alright, I guess that's it. Once everything's dry, I will show you how it all came out. Should be another day or 2, so we'll get right back to that. Alright, so everything is dry and ready to be put away to spin later. So this one was the one with the stellina, as you can see. It's very glittery. So this one I used jacquard violet, purple, gunmetal, and scarlet. And I really love those 4 colors together. The 2 different shades of red end up with very different intensities. And I think the scarlet might have a little bit more of a very slight blue to it, so it blends into the gunmetal better. And then for whatever reason the violet has a lot of red to it, so it plays really well into the scarlet, but also into the purple and the gunmetal. So just the 4 colors do really nicely. I really like this particular set of colors. I didn't really have any particular plan in how I put these into the dye bath. I just kind of poured them in there from the soaking basin because I wanted as much tonal variation as possible, and also I was in a bit of a hurry because I was on my way out the door, so there's that. I don't see any dulling with the sparkle. It's still very sparkly, so I guess the turn up the heat and add the acid last process did work. Love this part right here. I was a little nervous with that because this is not a superwash wool, but if you're using a superwash wool with sparkle, that will be even easier, so you wouldn't even have to really worry about it. So yeah, I really like how this one came out. I'm gonna go grab the next one, which I think was the Brown Ranger. So the Brown Ranger wool is where I first started having my mistakes with the double the amount of dye I needed. So I had a lot of extra dye in the pot after I pulled this. And again, I was going for tonal variation, so it's not like I laid them out in any particular way. I just kind of spread them out in the water and let the dye go where it wanted to. So after I pulled the wool, whatever was left in the water, I put this merino tencel in to soak in as much as possible before starting the next dye bath. So for the colors, I used jacquard scarlet, red, deep orange, actually I think it's fire red, deep orange, and then sun yellow, I think. So yeah, I don't know how this one ended up this vibrant. I would not have expected that, but I mean, I like the coral color quite a bit. It's very nice. So I'm going to set this one aside. The wool is reasonably soft, but it does have more of a toothiness to it than the others do because of the rambouillet in it instead of being pure merino. And it is just a really nice wool. This one will be really fun to spin. Very fall. It'll make something beautifully fall inspired. This is the Recycle Yarn Collective one. It's mostly wool and then 10% recycled bits, so there's all sorts of different random colors, kind of like a tweed. This is the one where I realized as I was setting it up that I had made the math mistake, so I ended up going down to 3 grams of dye, and that still ended up being too much because I still had enough dye to do this cashmere sweater that I'm gonna unravel later. And it'll just be this really pretty dusty blue once it's unraveled. It'll be really nice. It's so soft. Anyway, I really like how this came out, and it does have kind of a gradient effect going on, so it goes from this Caribbean color to this more deep blue color, and then kind of breaks off into more of a gunmetal gray blue. So let's see, I think I did use gunmetal for this one, so it was gunmetal, sky blue, and turquoise all jacquard. Yeah, this one, again, and these are all going to be so fun to spin, but this one, the colors just came out really cool. So I like that one quite a bit. Originally, this was going to have green on it as well. That was the 4th color I had measured out for this one. And then when I realized that I only needed like 2.5 grams of dye per 8 ounces instead of 4, I moved the green shade to the next dye pot, so that is why I ended up with green on that one. So I'm gonna go get that. All right, so this is the final one, and this is my favorite, but also the one that frustrated me the most. So originally I had 1/2 gram of purple pop to go into 1 gram of the fluorescent fuchsia, which would then go into 1 gram of the fluorescent safety orange, and then into the fluorescent, I think it's called lemon. And then I was going to end it there. It's just going to be 3.5 grams of dye. However, I didn't want to waste the chartreuse I had measured out, so I added the gram of chartreuse on the end of this, because I figured, hey, in addition to this 8-ounce braid, I'm also going to be doing a massive skein of merino tencel to finish off my cone of merino tencel. So between the two of them, it's enough weight to handle 4.5 grams of dye, which it was. I mean, I didn't really have much dye left in the pot at all. What I did not consider is exactly how many colors that would be. I mean, obviously I knew how many colors it was, but I thought that the orange, yellow, and pink would blend together more smoothly and there'd be less overall shades. I guess if I had mixed them with water first instead of adding them as powders, that is how it would have worked, but I didn't do that. So it ended up being incredibly vibrant and bright and wild, which was very frustrating when I first saw it, because I was disappointed in how my last merino tencel skein came out. But now that it's completely dry and I'm looking at it more, I'm a lot happier with it. This is extremely tropical and fun, and it'll be a great warp for a weaving project. And it goes really well with the coral that I dyed earlier. And I think the two of them together will just be fantastic. And then this one, the way it gradiates, I think when it's actually spun, it'll be a little bit less insane and just be really, really fun. So just like a gradient as it goes up from the purpley and pink up to the bright green. So hopefully that'll blend the colors a little bit more smoothly so it's less patchy. But even if it doesn't, it is really bright and fun. And even if I end up not liking it, by the time it's spun, somebody will like it. So there is that. So yeah, that is everything that I dyed in this dye batch. I hope it was helpful to you, even if I did make a pretty massive mistake. And hopefully by looking at my mistakes, you will not make the same mistake. There is one other thing I wanted to talk about. Hopefully the cars in the background are not super loud in this video, because I can hear them and they're driving me crazy, but hopefully they're not too loud for you. All right, where was I? Right. So while I was filming this video and I was finishing up all of the dye stuff, I had talked in the beginning about how much I love Echoview fiber mill. And then as I was filming this, I got an email from them that they were closing for good. So by the time this video airs, they will no longer exist, which is extremely upsetting for me, because I did really enjoy them. And it's always sad when a mill closes, or anything to do with yarn and fiber, because there's really not that many left in the world, especially in the United States. Echoview fiber mill was in North Carolina, which was really cool, and I had been hoping to actually visit them eventually, and now that's never going to happen. So yeah, I'm pretty bummed out. I did buy one last big order, so when that arrives, and by the time this video airs, that will probably have already arrived. When that arrives, I will film opening that and talk through that a little bit. But in the meantime, I guess I'm going to have to find another source for my fiber. So I do have a mill nearby, but they don't sell it like this. I really liked the Roving I got from Echoview fiber mill, but when I buy from the Jaggerspun mill shop, they do have some Roving, but it's usually like blended colors. And for the undyed stuff, it's more like bits off the carder, like it's like scrappy bits instead of roving. And roving's just so fun to dye. I like the scrappy bits and they are fun to spin, but they're not the same. So I'm gonna have to find another mill, I guess. That or start buying fleeces and sending them to a mill and having my own stuff blended or something. So yeah, I'm gonna miss Echoview fiber mill quite a bit, and I guess I'll have to go add a little note on all of my videos where I mention them that they are no longer in business. So I guess I'll be spending the afternoon doing that. Thanks so much for watching my video. I hope it was helpful to you, and I hope to see you all again soon. See you next time, I guess.